started with you all. Welcome again, everybody, to Moving Swiftly into 2025 Leadership Lessons We All Can, and I would add should, learn from Taylor Swift. I am Randi Braun. I am so excited to be here with you. And I just want to test the tech one more time. Can you let me know if you can see my screen by just throwing me a +1 in the chat? I think it came off for a second and then it came back on. Lon says, yes, I can see the screen. Okay, fabulous. Well, I am so excited to spend this time with you all. And I'm going to introduce myself in a moment. Before I do, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you joining? And what is your favorite Taylor Swift song, if you have one? If you can't figure out a song, you're welcome to give me an era. And don't worry, if you don't have a favorite Taylor Swift song, you're not such a Taylor Swift fan, but you're just intrigued by the business of it all and how she has created this incredible empire, there is still so much here for you, for Swifties and non-Swifties alike. So I just want to see this in the chat. Would love for you all to introduce yourself. Please let me know, what is your, where are you joining us from today? And what is your favorite song? And I already love what's coming in. First off, we have people, okay, this webinar just officially became international. We have Toronto, we have Texas, we have Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Virginia, San Diego. I think we have every time zone in the United States and Canada represented. Milwaukee, and more importantly, favorite songs. Let's see, Bejeweled, Tim McGraw, Shake It Off, I Forgot That You Existed. I just want to say, Abby, who put in I Forgot You Existed, it's her favorite song. I think that is like a total anthem about toxic bosses. And we're going to talk about today a lot of the stuff that Taylor Swift does and talks about, models, things about, is all so transferable to work. Carrie says, hi from Buffalo. Her favorite song is Willow. Anna's here from London. Okay, so we've officially gone international. I'm so thrilled to spend this time with you. And allow me to introduce myself for those of you who haven't met me. I'm Randi Braun. I am so excited to spend this time with you talking about how we can move swiftly towards our goals this year with leadership lessons that we can all learn from Taylor Swift. I am an executive coach. I run a women's leadership firm based here in Washington, D.C., but I work all around the world, called Something Major. And I'm also the proud author of this book called Something Major, the New Playbook for Women at Work. And everything that I do in my coaching approach, in my book, in my content, is all about helping women really feel empowered to write your own rules to feel successful in your life and your work. And I can't think of anyone who models that better than Taylor Swift does. When we think about someone who has really reinvented the playbook for what it means to be successful, to be at the top of your game, and to do it your own way. So let's talk a little bit today about where we're going, because as Taylor herself says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I'm pretty sure that she did not come up with that quote, but I love the way she sings it in the song Mastermind. So we're just going to give her some attribution for that for the day. And let's talk a little bit about where we're going to go today. We're going to talk about 5 leadership lessons that I believe all women can learn from Taylor Swift. I think there's probably 1,000 leadership lessons. So I'm just going to choose 5 that really resonate with me, that touch a lot of the themes that I work on with my clients. And I just want to say right off the bat, I am not a Taylor Swift expert. I'm a leadership expert, not a Taylor Swift expert. I'm an expert in helping women thrive at work, not an expert on her catalog. So it's totally possible that some of you who are joining are bigger Swifties than I am. And if you have something that pops up for you, a lesson, a thought, a question, I want to hear it from you in the chat. We're going to keep this as interactive as possible. And I just think that there's so much that we can learn from her. In doing that, we're going to talk about, for each lesson, what's the iconic moment that Taylor Swift had that really demonstrates these lessons in action. And then I think most importantly is we're going to look at practical tools for how we can translate these lessons back into our regular, very non-celebrity work lives, right? We're never going to sell out a stage at SoFi Stadium. If that's your goal, dream big. I'm so excited for you. But I think most of us probably are not going to do that. So how can we take the things that she models around authenticity, around relationships, around knowing your value, all of which we're going to dig into today, and talk about how to bring it to our next tough meeting at work, how to bring it to that tough boss, that tough stakeholder. And we're going to talk about very real tools I use in my real clients to help them really create change in their lives. One thing that I just want to say very quickly before we jump on, and those of you who have come to a Something Major event before have probably heard me say this, I want to be crystal clear in sharing that nothing that I say here today is a prescription. There is no one size fits all. Just even looking through the chat, right, we have people from every time zone in the United States and Canada represented. We have folks joining from Canada, from the United Kingdom, from the United States. Every single person on this call is a different learner, a different leader, has a different lived experience, a different origin story. You're a different woman with your own life. And so I want you to think about what we do today as more of a buffet. I hope that each one of you will walk away with 1 to 2 things that move the dial for you so that you can learn to lead swiftly towards your goals. And I'm just excited to spend this time with you. I recently gave this talk at a conference, and someone actually asked me a question I had never gotten before, which was, what inspired you to write this talk? And I told her very simply, I was sitting on a plane ride from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California. So hi to my Californians here today. And I wanted to write an article about this. And there was honestly just so much content that I was like, this is a 1-hour talk. It is not an 800-word article. So with that, I would absolutely love to jump in. And I want to hear from you in the chat. What is one thing that you admire about Taylor Swift and the way that she leads? Right, I'm going to walk you through my lessons of what I think Taylor Swift really models well, but I'd love to hear from you too. What is something that you think that Taylor Swift models? And you can just give me one word. It could be authenticity. It could be courage. Whatever's on your mind. And I just want to read. Carrie says unstoppable confidence. Emily says resilience. Kyla says humble roots. Lon says resilience. I think that all of these things are true. Are there any questions for me before we jump in? And I just want to read Jessica. She said she cheers on others and advocates for newer artists. So true. Look at what she's done to Sabrina Carpenter, Gracie Adams, Charlie XCX back on what tour was it that she took her on? Anyway, like I said, if anyone knows which tour she took Charlie XCX on, feel free to pop it in the chat. And just a quick check. I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen. If you can't, please holler in the chat. Okay, so let's start with the first lesson that I think Taylor Swift models just so incredibly. And it's really about this idea of pursuing your dreams relentlessly, emphasis on relentlessly. And when I think about the iconic moment that models this, I have mine, but I want to hear from you in the chat if anyone wants to throw it in. Do you think that there's an iconic moment that Taylor Swift has really shown that represents how she pursues her dreams relentlessly? And I'll admit it's a little bit of a trick question because for me, it's not a particular moment. It's really the arc of the last 18 years. For almost 2 decades, she has shown up every single day relentlessly, reinventing herself. And I think just what's so inspiring to me is that this is something that is really a lifelong, lifelong thing that she has said, you know, my career is a long game, but it requires short-term action every single day. And Phoenix just put in the chat that one of the things she thinks is a really iconic moment in pursuing her dreams relentlessly is re-recording her albums, which Phoenix is something we're going to talk about later as another iconic moment for another lesson. But I agree, I think it really demonstrates this. Like, nobody can say that Taylor Swift has been anything if she hasn't been relentless in pursuing her dreams. And I swear, I want to start because I think that we all need to give ourselves permission to pursue our dreams relentlessly. I work with a lot of high-performing women. And one of the things that's a common theme, whether they work, you know, here in DC on Capitol Hill, or they work all the way across the country for a healthcare nonprofit or an entertainment studio in Los Angeles, is this. There are too many of us who are so good at crushing it at work, but we feel absolutely positively crushed in the process. We are so good at crushing it at other people's goals, and we feel crushed in the process sometimes. And so I really want to start here, if you take nothing away from this, with helping you remember that your goals matter and you deserve to not just have the space for goals and dreams, but the tools to pursue them relentlessly. And so I want to talk to you about some of the ways that I think that as women, we can translate a little bit of this, right? About the constant relentlessness, about the reinvention, about the daily pursuit into our own goals. I want to start with what I think is the simplest thing, which is that we have to name our goals. So with that, I want to hear one thing from you in the chat that you want more of in your life this year. Let's like start just right there. Like, what is something that you want more of in your life this year? I'm going to say that I want more health in my year this year. That probably wouldn't have been my answer a few days ago, but I busted my knee skiing over the weekend, and it is going to be a very long recovery for me. So my new goal, as of just 72-ish hours ago, is that I'm looking for more health in my life. And I want to hear, Megan says she's looking for more positivity. Carrie says more joy. Kyla says more energy. Jessica says more recovery time. Excellent. Ladies, you just named a goal. And the reason that I start here at this very simple starting place is this. You would be stunned. So many people come to me as a coach to say that they want to work on something, but they don't actually name their goals. And I just want to remind you, I know goals can feel like a little bit loaded as a term. You know, a goal can be something as a small want, right? Which is like, I just want to get a little bit more sleep. Or it could be something as big as a big dream. Like, I dream of starting my own business one day. We cannot pursue our dreams relentlessly until we name them. And so I want to encourage you to be more thoughtful about naming your goals and claiming your goals. I think for a lot of us, we have things that we dream of, we have things that we think of, but we're so busy. And so maybe like we think about it when we're washing our hair in the shower at 6 o'clock in the morning, and by the time we rinse the conditioner, we've moved on to the next thing because our day is too busy. Or we think about it when we're walking the dog at 10 o'clock at night, when we have that quiet moment, but by the time we get in bed, brush our teeth, pass out, worry about all the things we have on our calendar the next day, it's gone, it's fleeting. I want you to name your goals. The second thing that I think you can do to really put this into practice is something that I think Swift really models very implicitly day in and day out. We have to focus on making small yes and small no commitments. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. I think that people forget, this is something I observe as a coach, that goals, just because we want them, just because we dream them, doesn't mean they're necessarily intuitive. And I always tell people, like, if you really want to pursue your dreams relentlessly, you have to be really conscientious about what you're going to say yes to. Because if you were already doing that thing, then this wouldn't be a goal. It would be stuff you accomplished last year. So like if my goal, going back to what Jessica said, is to have more recovery time, Jessica, I'd be curious about like, what is it that you need to say yes to on a daily micro basis, right? To get closer to that goal. Is it saying yes to more rest? Is it saying yes to more exercise, to more outside time, to more alone time, to more together time? Jessica, I don't know what recovery time means to you, but we have to figure out what it is that we are going to say yes to. And Jessica says that for her, like that would have to be saying yes to blocking more quiet reflection time. And then even more importantly, you got to figure out what no's you're going to build to protect your yes. So like if making that yes commitment was easy, Jessica, blocking that quiet reflection time was easy, then you would probably already be doing it. So first it's about declaring the yes, and then what is it that you're going to say no to in order to protect that yes commitment? And I think a lot of times we think that our goals have to be pursued with these grand gestures. But part of pursuing our dreams relentlessly is about looking for small yeses and small nos, the everyday choices. You know, my friend Kate said to me the other day, something that really stuck out, and I think it speaks to Taylor Swift, and I think it certainly speaks to women on this call. She said, it takes a lot of work to be an overnight success. So what is it that you're going to really say yes to and say no to every single day? Once we know about that, it's really important to think about how we make our goals a contact sport. I think sometimes as high-performing women, and I'd love to hear from you in the chat, just throw me like a that's me if this is you. I think that sometimes we can be a little perfectionistic. I know I can be a little bit of a perfectionist, so if it was me, I would totally throw that's me in the chat. because that is so me. And a lot of times, one of the things that prevents us from pursuing our dreams relentlessly is that we don't share our goals and our dreams with other people because we tell ourselves, oh, I'll share it when I have the perfect plan. And that means we spend a lot more time burrowing in research, making strategic plans, living in Google Docs instead of living out our goals. When the people around us often have the question, the answer, the introduction, the idea that's going to help us advance our dreams. And then finally, we have to remember that our goals are a literal marathon. And so I know it's hard sometimes to think about connecting this incredible brand and business that Taylor Swift has built by pursuing her dreams relentlessly to our lives. But I want to give you a real example from my real coaching practice. So back in 2020, I was running one of my group coaching cohorts. These are groups that I run a few times a year for women. And we had a woman in the group who was truly the busiest person I knew at that point during COVID. She had committed her entire career to social justice. So after the murder of George Floyd, her work was in the spotlight in a way it had never been before throughout her entire career. And adding insult to injury in terms of the stressors and the busyness, she has 3 kids in 3 different teleschools. And we were doing a session that night about goals and about dreams. And I said to her, I was like, hey, if you had 15 more minutes tomorrow, like what is something you would absolutely positively love to do? She said, I used to be a runner. I actually stopped running a while ago, just life got too busy becoming a mom, but I feel like I could really use it more than ever. And I just wish that I could go for a run tomorrow, right? So step 1, she named her goals. So I was like, okay, so like, what do you need to do to say yes to make that happen? She said, I guess I just set my alarm just 15 minutes earlier. And if I leave out my clothes overnight, so if they're just laying for me, by the time I get up, get dressed, and brush my teeth, that would give me 10 minutes to run. And I said, that sounds like a great idea, a great start. What is it that you would need to say no to protect that yes? And she said, I'm going to have to say no to hitting the snooze button. So we went on to making a contact sport. I said, okay, well, who's going to support you on this? Said my partner, I'm going to have them push me out of the bed when my alarm clock goes off the next morning. Okay, great. She did all this. She came back to the cohort. We all cheered her on. She came to coaching. And to be completely honest with you, this never really came up again until, if you can see in the back corner of my screen, these champagne bottles. I send these champagne bottles out to all my clients every January with a note that just says, put this in the fridge, and when something major happens to you this year, pop it and send me a picture so I can celebrate it with you. And I got an email back from her that she had popped her bottle of champagne because from her very first run, she ran her first marathon in like a matter of months, less than a year. And so personally, I'm never going to run a marathon. It's not that I don't dream big. It's just that that's not my dream. But this is a real story, and it's not just Taylor Swift. It's not just this woman who's a real woman who lives in Buffalo, New York. I want you to feel empowered to pursue your dreams relentlessly. So that's the first lesson that I hope that we're all going to learn from Taylor Swift. And let's move on to the second. And by the way, please feel free to throw stuff in the chat. Megan said, this is so me. I want to hear how things are resonating with you. And please also throw any questions you have there too. The second lesson that I think that we all need to learn from Taylor Swift is that we do not let the jerks get us down. And I'm curious, what do you think the iconic moment is for not letting the jerks get us down? And it's not just Taylor Swift being booed at the Super Bowl a few weeks ago, which is its own situation. Megan says VMAs 2009. Megan, will you elaborate, or someone else? Who was it in the VMAs? Kanye. The Kanye West incident. For those of you who don't know this, I'll, keep it kind of snappy, but basically Taylor Swift won the VMA for Album of the Year. Kanye West basically comes onto the stage, takes the microphone away from her in the middle of her acceptance speech, and gives a whole speech about how Beyonce would have been more deserving of the award. I think that we can all in our work lives think of a time when a mean or toxic boss put us down, when a colleague made us feel bad about ourselves. Can you imagine doing it on a literal stage in front of hundreds of millions of people who are watching this show around the world? I cannot. And I think that this ethos of not letting the jerks derail us and get us down is one of the most important lessons that women need to really learn and internalize. After the Kanye incident, even though Taylor Swift would later say that she wanted to, I think her exact words were curl up in a ball and die, she ended up writing Shake It Off and then subsequently put together the entire Reputation album, which is basically a revenge album against Kanye. And when I think about these tools, I just think that this feels like one of the most doable things that we can all do in our work lives because most of us have not actually had a jerk try and take us down in such a public way as doing it as an award show. And I really want to dig into how we can all do this in our own lives. And I just want to read what Phoenix said. She loves how Beyonce supported her at that award show, and we're going to talk more about the relationship between Beyonce and Taylor later. And Lon says, people are always saying, there's just something I don't like about her. Yeah, isn't that so funny, Lon, that like we have this pattern where really strong, successful women just have this weird like ability problem? So that's like a whole nother thing when it comes to likability trap. We have to release the fact that not everyone is going to like us. And if you haven't already, you should read a great book called The Likeable Badass by my friend and colleague, Allison Frigal. So let's talk about, these lessons that we can take from not letting the jerks get us down. The first thing is that I want you to understand that feedback doesn't define you. Just like Kanye taking the microphone away from Taylor Swift and saying she didn't deserve it, didn't define whether or not she deserved it. I want us to remember that feedback doesn't always define us. I think we can all appreciate that feedback, especially in a professional setting, is so important. We learn so much from feedback from people who have our backs. But I think a lot of us, and this isn't how you were raised necessarily maybe in your home, but just societally, we're raised with what psychologists call the good girl curse, which is that a lot of us are raised to not rock the boat, to be good, to be quiet, to not make too much noise, to be pleasers. And I think in a lot of our professional lives, we internalize that as constantly seeking feedback and editing ourselves for the approval of others. And that's why I want you to think about these 3 essential truths about feedback, and I write about them in my book. The first is that feedback tells us a lot more about the feedback giver than the feedback receiver. So a lot of times when we're hearing feedback from someone, it's really a reflection about their preferences, their priorities, their beliefs, their biases, their values. I was coaching a client of mine who is a Black woman, and she came to me with a situation at work, and she's telling me the story about this stakeholder who's been really tough. And she tells me this whole story, and I said to her, I just have to pause you. Like, did that sound racist to you when she said that? Because like the way you're telling me that story, like I kind of feel like I'm picking up on some microaggressions. Like I wasn't there in the conversation. It's not my lived experience, but like, are you hearing what I'm hearing? She said to me, she's like, yeah, actually, like it did feel kind of racist to me, but this person's really important. She's in charge of how I'm going to get my compensation. And everyone at the firm really takes her opinion seriously. So I didn't know if I was just being too sensitive. And it was a great classic example. We talked about, hey, listen, like, let's think about what this feedback tells us about you, but let's also figure out what this feedback tells us about her, because it was such a clear example of how the feedback givers' beliefs and biases were impacting the conversation. Which brings us to the next truth about feedback, which is that feedback, by definition, is subjective. I can't say this enough. Feedback is not an objective fact about who you are. It is merely a reflection of how one specific person is observing or evaluating something they hear from you in one specific moment in time. And then finally, I want you to remember that feedback is a snapshot of a moment in time, right? It's situational. Feedback is not an immutable truth about who you are. I'm going to say it again. Feedback is not an immutable truth about who you are. And I think it's important that we hear feedback and we learn from feedback and we grow from feedback. However, we need to make sure that we don't let the Kanyes of our workplace cloud our vision of who we are. So these to me are how we translate that don't let the jerks get you down mindset into the interactions and tough conversations that we have at work. I'd love to hear from you how this is landing with you. And I think that the real other lesson here too is that we are not going to give toxic people permission to derail our dreams. Just because someone doesn't believe in something that you want to do doesn't mean that you can't do it. And I think that if Taylor Swift listened to every single person who told her that she went on too many dates, that she didn't deserve her VMA, she would not be the success that she is today, nor would she be apparently propping up our economy. If you saw the research that came out around how many billions of dollars the Eras Tour generated for the American economy. Any questions here about how we can translate this leadership lesson of not letting the jerks get us down into the Kanyes of our own work lives? Should we keep going? Um, the third lesson that I want to talk about today when it comes to Swift is remembering that your ideas are your brand currency. And before I get there, I just want to read something that Megan just put in the chat. She said, I think it's important to think about who is giving you the feedback and their intentions, if they're a jerk or not. Megan, I want to bold, underline, highlight that. I know that my life has been changed by people in my professional career giving me feedback because they believed in me, they had my back, they wanted to make me better, they wanted to make me smarter, savvier, present better. I think it's just so important to evaluate when we're taking feedback in. Does this person have my best intentions at heart? And to understand who's giving us feedback. You know, one of my clients always says when it comes to feedback, she doesn't like to throw away the bottle with the wine. Pardon me, she doesn't like to throw away the wine with the cork. Um, and at the same time, we want to make sure that we're taking feedback to heart, but they're not taking it as an immutable truth. And Megan, like you said, understanding, is this a Kanye in my work life? Or for those of you who in the chat, we were talking about how Beyonce has supported her, or is this a Beyonce in your work life? That's really, really important. So the third lesson, right? Understanding your ideas are your brand currency. I'm curious for you, what do you think the iconic moment is for thinking about the fact that your ideas are your brand currency when it comes to Taylor Swift and the way that she's modeled this? Megan says the Eras Tour. Um, I think that that's a great extension of what I'm about to say, which is about doing it her way. Everything that Taylor has done has really been about her way. And something for me that really sums that up is the way that she talks about songwriting as a secret weapon. And I pulled this quote. I remember the first time I watched the Miss Americana documentary, I was on an Acela train between DC and New York. And I literally did the thing on my iPad where you can like back up 30 seconds and re-listen to this. And she says this in the documentary. I know that without me writing my own songs, I wouldn't be here. Everybody in music has their own niche, specialty thing that they do that sets them apart from everybody else. And my storytelling is what it is for me. And I think that that idea of your ideas, your own storytelling being your brand currency is one of the most important lessons that women need to learn today to position themselves for success, whether it is the success of the execution of your great ideas, success in terms of positioning yourself for a raise or a promotion, for promoting yourself if you're an entrepreneur. And when we talk about these tools, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that I want every woman on this call to really internalize this lesson of your ideas being your brand currency and just getting comfortable in sharing your ideas more. And that is speaking up in the meeting, sharing the idea in the email, showing up on LinkedIn, and thinking about how you show up consistently and constantly. Taylor Swift has written something like 250 songs. Not every single one of them is the winner. That was our favorite song that some of you listed at the beginning. But it's the amalgamation, it's the compound interest effect of putting all of these things together, about showing up consistently, about owning it, and understanding and appreciating that your brand is iterative. One of the things I love about the way that Taylor Swift models this idea of our ideas being our brand currency is that we have permission to show up, share our ideas, and know that our ideas can change and can grow. And Stephanie even just put in the chat, one of the things she loves that she feels like reflects this is, re-recording all the Taylor's versions of her songs. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. And if you listen to the new versions, there's all these little sudden differences, right? Because like she had a new idea for how she wanted to do it. And you have permission to do that too. And I want you to think about, as you own your ideas as your brand currency, how can you own your message with confidence, right? And in my book, I talk about 16 things I forbid you to say at work. And this is one example of how I really believe that we can translate these into our work lives. Because when our ideas are our brand currency and we're cutting them down, we're just cutting ourselves down. So here are some of the things I always say, forbid you to say when you're sharing your ideas. And I'd love to hear from you in the chat if you're guilty of any of these. Just feel free to throw me a guilty if you're guilty of any of these, right? Which is, I've already probably thought of this, or I might be missing something, or it's a dumb idea, or you all know more about this than I do. Or my favorite, and I put favorite in air quotes, is when you have an idea and you say, have we thought about, and you pose it as a question, all you're doing is you're giving permission to Todd or Brock or Jake or Jim or whatever guy is sitting next to you to take credit for your idea when you phrase it as a question. And you say, I'm no expert, but, and using we instead of I. A lot of us have been taught, we want to use we language and be collaborative. And of course, there are times to use we and there are times to use I. I just find that high performing women sometimes over index to the we when you have an opportunity to tell a story about your personal achievement. And I see that some of you are guilty. Phoenix says, oh, 5 and 7, that's me. So 5, Phoenix, was how we thought about it. 7 was using we instead of I. I also want to forbid you from saying some of these crutch words, right? Which is just, actually, maybe, I wanted to. And we're going to talk more about sorry. I mean, how many of you have ever said the word sorry when what you really meant was hello, excuse me, thank you for waiting? We have to be aware of these crutch words, as well as like what our fallbacks when we're receiving praise. A lot of times when someone says thank you, we say, oh, just happy to help, or it was nothing. That is a miss. If your ideas are your brand currency and someone is thanking you for your ideas and your contributions, what you are missing is an opportunity to quietly take credit for what you've done. Think about the difference if someone says, Abby says that she's an over-apologizer. Think about, Abby, what the difference is between if you worked really hard on a big project and the client or your boss, whoever it was, is thrilled with your performance and say, thank you so much. I can tell Abby all the hard work that you put into this. And you say, oh, it was nothing. It's just that they recognize your hard work. Why are you downgrading the praise? Why are you downgrading the accomplishment? Why are you downgrading the achievement? Versus how different it is to say, I'm so thrilled I was able to help with this and that my contributions made a difference here. Or thank you so much for trusting me with this. I love the way that the project came out and I can't wait to work together again. Your ideas are your brand currency. That is why, and I have this sorry as its own call out, I truly forbid you to put these 4 words into an email when you don't respond automatically, which is sorry for the delay. Please stop apologizing for the delay when you didn't get back to the email in 3 minutes, 3 seconds, maybe even 3 days. Most of the time, it doesn't matter. And what I've seen is that it really lets other people weaponize your apologies. When you are an over-apologizer, you cut down your street cred. You actually make yourself seem, I know a lot of us do it for likability, you actually come across as less reliable. And so I want you to be conscientious. If your ideas are your brand currency, why are you using hedge words? Why are you apologizing? Why are you not speaking up in the meeting? Why are you not showing up on LinkedIn? Which, by the way, is like one of my favorite ways to translate this into our work lives. Your ideas are your brand currency, okay? Any questions about this? I can see that this list really resonated for people. Or with people, I should say. Oh, and I want to call out something that Lon said. Lon says, it's a balance. Assertiveness is a double bind. Assertiveness double bind is real. This is true, backlash, for confident women if they don't do it carefully. We is a good way to deflect that. Lon, I completely agree that nobody likes a bragger. And so I don't want you to leave here, Lon. And Alon, I'm glad you raised the question because usually if one person asks it, someone else is thinking it. I'm not here to tell you to blow up anything about your life. We're not here to make radical changes. Everything that I do in my writing and my coaching is all about creating opportunities for incremental change and incremental experiments. So if you notice that your default is we, then could you just maybe one more time a week try to put in an I? Or could you thread the needle between I and we, right? Like maybe you lead a team and you can say instead of, we did a great job on this project, let's say you're talking about it to people up the change, say, I am so proud of what the team accomplished. And you can talk about the specific accomplishments on people's, the specific accomplishments for different people. I would also suggest two awesome books. The first, and I'm just trying to see if I can reach them with my bum knee, which I don't think I can. The first is called Brag Better by Meredith Feynman. I'm going to put this in here by Meredith Feynman. And the second one is Likeable Badass by Alison Fergale. And both of them go into tremendous detail about more and more tips. But the truth is like, there are some people who are threatened by strong and successful women. And so what I would say is, I would be cognizant of knowing that you know your stakeholders better than I do. But in my experience, most of the time I find that we tend to be a little too timid as the default, more than a little too bold. I don't know you personally or your work experience. So I hear that, and always do what makes you feel safe and comfortable in your workplace. But I just wanted to give a little bit of texture to maybe look at it differently. And Joanne, I wonder if you read my book, because I talked about this in here. She already answered Randy's question in the chat the way that I was going to. Randy, the other Randy B, hey Randy B, said, what do you recommend instead of sorry for the delay? I really love thanks for your patience, but I don't want you to make thanks for your patience the new sorry for the delay. Like 9 out of 10 times, the correct response to sorry for the delay is just to eliminate it. Like most of the time, think about how many emails you send a day. Most of the time someone emails you, they don't even remember it. So like, here's the thing. If someone emails you and it was truly, truly time sensitive, and let's say you were sitting in traffic and you didn't get it, and you know, a deadline was missed because of it, then maybe say sorry for the delay. But I really just think that a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves to be more responsive. Another thing that I like to do when I know that I can't get back to someone right away is instead of setting myself up for an email where I have to respond, sorry for the delay, what I will do is just kind of do what I call a soft touch, where I will write back and say, just wanted to let you know that I got your email and I'll be in touch in follow-up. Notice I don't make any commitment about tomorrow, today, this afternoon, close of business. I just find that a lot of times as women, we're taking on all this extra work with all this extra urgency that wasn't necessarily actually required. And so I just want you to be cognizant about the stories that you're telling yourself in your head about the urgency or the importance. And before you get so attached to the story, just like check yourself, like, is this fiction or nonfiction? Let me just check in with the chat. Joanne says she didn't read the book. So we're just a great minds think alike on that. Amy says your book was life-changing. Oh my God, Amy, thank you. I'm very touched by that. I'm so glad that it was life-changing for you. That's beautiful to hear. And Jessica says, thank you for that. I do quite a fair amount of I'll do X by Y when I feel stressed about not responding within the day. I think that communicating about when you're going to get back to someone is a great tool. As long as you meet the deadlines, quote unquote, it just only makes you look even more reliable and dependable. And Randy says hi to the other Randy B. The other thoughts or questions here, like your ideas are your currency. Like Taylor Swift talks about how her songwriting is her secret weapon, and your ideas, they're your secret weapon too. You might not be sitting at a piano, but your email, your talking points, your briefing document, your slides, they're your currency. Let's go to the next lesson. And then also, if you have other questions, like we have some time at the end, so you're also welcome to just have and ask me anything about like women, work, Taylor Swift, though I would say there's probably people on this call with more Taylor Swift knowledge than I have. The fourth lesson is really all about knowing your value and being willing to fight for it. And when I think about the iconic moment that really represents this, it's something that Phoenix and some of the other women mentioned earlier in the chat, which is the re-releasing all the Taylor's versions in her catalog. So some of you might know the story that years ago, Scooter Braun acquired Taylor Swift's masters. Scooter and Taylor had some bad blood, no pun intended. He was a huge supporter of many of the people who had been taking her down, from Justin Bieber to Kanye. And Taylor Swift, like, literally could not stomach that someone who put things into the world that made her life more difficult, that cut her down, was going to make money every single time someone bought a CD or someone streamed her song. And so what she decided to do was something that we hadn't really seen before, which was re-recording all of her albums. And they've been released, I think, through 1989. I think the next one we're waiting for is Reputation, in this Taylor's version, right? The Eras Tour is like the epitome of the Taylor's version. And this idea of just really, like, knowing what your value is and being willing to fight for it. She just couldn't stomach that someone who didn't see her value was going to profit off her value. And how many of us have ever been in a work situation like that, where somebody, I know I've been in a work situation, I write about it in the book, where somebody who didn't see my value was bullying me, but literally making money off my value, even if they didn't see it. And so I want to think about the tools together that you can use to know your value and fight for it. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think about how we translate this into our work lives is really to understand, like, this from a negotiations perspective. So sometimes I give this talk inside workplaces. And so if you've seen it inside a workplace, we usually don't talk about this slide inside the workplace, but I'll walk you through this today. The first is about understanding the difference between right sizing and raises. Most of us statistically are underpaid, right? Like, it's not my opinion. It is a fact that we have a serious pay gap between men and women, a gap that only increases for women of color. And a lot of times we think that we need to get a raise, but a lot of times part of knowing our value and being willing to fight for it is understanding, wait, do I need to be right-sized or get a raise? So a raise is a merit-based increase in our comp as a reward for excellent performance. So, like, let's see, I'm looking at the chat. Amy, let's say you had amazing performance this year. You deserve to go and know your value and fight for it by advocating for a raise in your performance review. But a lot of us don't just need a raise. We need to understand when we need to ask for a right sizing. And so right sizing is having your organization rescope your comp so that it's better aligned to your responsibilities, your role, and the KPIs and the benchmarks. So I'll give you an example. Years ago, this toxic boss accidentally copied me on an email telling me that my male counterpart, who was underperforming me, and it was sales, so like how people are performing is like extremely cut and dry, was getting a huge raise. And I literally wrote back saying, I don't think this email was intended for me. And so we had a meeting the next day, and I want to be very clear, knowing my value and fighting for it, I did not ask for a raise. I asked to be right-sized. I said, at the absolute minimum, I need to be brought up to what he is making. I should actually be making more because I'm producing more money for the business. So first thing I want you to think about as a tool that you can bring into your non-celebrity work life is to understand knowing your value and fighting for it, understanding when you need to ask to be right-sized, and understanding when you need to ask for a raise. The next thing is that we really need to pursue environments and people who see our value. One of the things I see a lot in my coaching business is like the amount of energy that women want to put into trying to change people who don't see their value. It's just a trend that I see. And one of my mentors, Mary Abijay, she wrote the book on managing up. It's literally called Managing Up, and I'll throw that title in the chat too, Managing Up, Mary Abijay. One of the things that Mary always says, like when you're in an environment where people don't see your value and it's like truly toxic, the best thing that you can do is to find a new environment for people who do see your value. And I think about the way that Taylor Swift modeled this. Like, she didn't try and change Kanye's mind. She didn't try and change Scooter Braun or Justin Bieber's mind. She focused on spending time with her fans, with people like the Beyoncés of her life who lifted her up. And I think that part of knowing our value is knowing when to cut our losses. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should leave this webinar and quit your job without another job lined up because people don't see your value. That's not my advice here today. But my advice here today is just a question to yourself, like, wait, if this is an environment that really doesn't recognize my value, or if this boss, like this boss that I had, the boss didn't see my value. Even the two executive sponsors I had above her did. But I just got to a point where it's like, I can't be here anymore because this person is blocking me from showing my value and feeling value. And so I found another job. I just want you to start to get curious about like, how much of this can I influence and how much of this is a sign that like I need to be spending more time in a different job environment or with a different boss or with different friends or with a different partner. Part of knowing our value and fighting for it, again, I just want to underscore this. It's something that really threads throughout. I just want to underscore it's really about being vocal and sharing your ideas. Like people who know they have value share their ideas. Sometimes the more senior we get, we want to actually sit back a little bit and have a little bit more restraint because we want to let the other people in the room have a chance. So I want to make sure that like that nuance is there. But I want you to know that you have value and be willing to fight for it. Like if you're in the middle of sharing an idea and someone talks over you, please like be vocal and finish your thought. And then the final lesson I want to share, and we'll hold it for Q&A at the end, is this idea of remembering that your relationships are everything. And when I think about the iconic moment that sums that up for me, it was bringing Beyonce to the Eras premiere. For years, the media had created this crazy story that Beyonce and Taylor Swift were secret enemies. Turns out they were kind of secret BFFs. And I think it's just such an iconic moment in really remembering that your relationships are everything. And it's where I like to end this talk today because I think our relationships, going back to that very first tool we talked about making goals a contact sport, they're everything for us too. So the first thing, and I think Swift models so beautifully, and we can model in our own work lives, is practicing shine theory. And shine theory is this idea from Amina Tussaud and Anne Friedman that I don't shine if you don't shine. This idea that as women, we go further if we start collaborating and hyping each other instead of cutting each other down and competing with each other. The next way that I encourage you to practice this is by being an amplifier. My AirPods just made a funny sound, pardon me for a second, is by being an amplifier. And there's a great story, Phoenix, I know you're a DC person like I am, that comes from the Obama White House that I write about in my book that Amy probably knows about, which is that President Obama had more women on his senior staff than any other president in American history. And yet a lot of the women in the room still felt like that they were being constantly spoken over or steamrolled. And so they began this practice called amplification, which is they made a concerted effort to band together. And when one person said something, they'd make an effort to conscientiously amplify that message. So if Jessica made a point in a meeting, I might say, building off what Jessica said or making a great point, I want to encourage you to think about like, where can you practice amplification in your workplace to hype other women, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And I love Phoenix says, yes, I was at the State Department then, and I remember this distinctly. There's a great Washington Post article on this. I think that we all need to build and lean on our own personal board of advisors. Those friends, those relationships, they are so, so, so important to making yourself feel supported and to having people who you can trust. And then finally, one of the things I think Taylor Swift models really wonderfully is like, do not shortchange quality time with our loved ones. Now, we can't all take a private jet home from Tokyo, where she was on the Eras tour to watch our husband play, or sorry, our boyfriend, whatever, play in the Super Bowl. But I think that we all can think about how we channel that into making sure that we're not shortchanging time with people that we love in small ways. So just to wrap it up before I take your questions, today we talked about 5 leadership lessons that all women can learn from Taylor Swift, the iconic moments that exemplify each one, and I hope you walked away with tons and tons of practical tools to translate these back into your regular non-celebrity work lives. And I'd love to hear from you in the chat before we move to Q&A. What's one thing that you're taking away from today? What is like one tool, one practice And while we wait for those to come in, I want to encourage you, we're going to spend these next 5 minutes taking any remaining questions. But I really do encourage you to keep in touch with me. And I'm going to keep these handles up here while we take Q&A. So if you have any Q&A, feel free to pop it in the box. But be in touch with me. I love to, stay in touch. I also want to let you know that we have tons of other exciting stuff happening here at Something Major. So we have lots more events coming up. We'll be announcing those soon. Our next retreat is next week at the Four Seasons in Fort Lauderdale. We'll be running a retreat in DC in June. We'll be running more power lunches this spring. Those are my signature women's leadership luncheon in New York City and DC. And we'll also be having monthly free events. So stay tuned. We'll have a free event again in March, in April, and beyond. And lastly, be in touch if you want to talk about anything about ways we can work together. If you are curious about coaching, if you're looking for a speaker for your company or your conference for Women's History Month, or for any other event 365 days a year. So I want to come back to the chat to see if anyone has any questions. I just want to read some of these key takeaways. Be myself. Don't question it. Keep amplifying other women. Stop apologizing. Know your value. Fight for it. Stop apologizing. Stop undercutting my ideas. Feedback doesn't define us. I love to hear that every woman is walking away with something so different. Final call for Q&A. And I'll stop recording in a second. Kyla says so many takeaways, too many to pick one. Stephanie says accept credit. I want to thank you so much for spending this time and hanging out with me. I just think that Taylor Swift, I think a lot of times the qualities that we admire in other women are things that we have inside of ourselves that we haven't learned how to access yet. And so I really hope that this hour-ish that we spent today helps you think about what are some of the lessons that we all see and admire from Taylor Swift, and how do we demystify how to live those, how to internalize them, how to practice them in our own lives. Once again, everybody, I'm Randi Braun. You can find out more about my work. You can read tons of free stuff, watch all sorts of free events on my website. We don't, paywall it. We don't make you give us your email address. That stuff is all there for you on demand 24/7. I really look forward to hanging out with you soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.